Welcome to week 3, part 2 in creating inevitability. Okay, without further ado, I want to celebrate you. Congratulations. You have made it to the second half of week 3, and you have probably drafted the bulk of your story by now. We're certainly on the home stretch of our 5 essential elements. If you hadn't written resolution, you'll do that this week, so no worries, but you've made it well over the halfway hump, so I'm very excited for you. I want you to give yourself a big hug. I want you to have a milkshake, pat yourself on the back, toot your horn, anything, because you have made it this far. And the rest of the journey, it's going to be fun. I hope it was fun before, but going forward, we're going to have even more fun. The rest of this week for part 2, now that we've written all 5 elements of our story, we're going to do something else to make our readers feel as if they'd expected the ending all along. And this is where it gets fun. We've already laid the pipe. We've already put the major plot points in play. So now what we do is a little bit like the icing on the cake. We want to make our readers feel as if they have been sucking on a milkshake. Ah, how sweet it is. They're going to be rewarded all around with a little foreshadowing. We're going to add a few touches of foreshadowing and bring our story full circle. We're also going to finish the rest of our story this week, at least the draft. Okay, so we have a lot to do. The lessons for week 3, as you might have noticed, are a little bit slimmer just because most of the work at this point is with you. And I want to give you support for that. I want to give you the time and space to finish drafting that story. Foreshadowing. It is what it sounds like. It's dropping a hint of what's to come early in the story. And you might think, well, gosh, that's weird. Why do you foreshadow? When do you do that? Are we doing it now after? Should we have done that ahead of time? Actually, no. It's better to do foreshadowing. I know it sounds sort of counterintuitive, but it's better to do it after you know what your story arc is and you know where you want to go. Because you needed to concentrate on the story and you needed to know where you were going to go before you could foreshadow about something. You can't do that. You can't foreshadow on a bygone conclusion if you don't know what that conclusion is. So here's what we're going to do. You can do subtle or obvious foreshadowing. We're going to give examples from some of those. Obvious works best if your character doesn't know it. Obvious foreshadowing is when the reader knows it and the character is having a change. We'll talk about that a little bit more. In Reunion, when Charlie calls his father his future and his doom, okay, that's a clear amount of foreshadowing. We know this lunch is probably not going to go the way he planned just by the word doom. The father's behavior is a clue that this isn't going to work. I mean, he's practically drunk by the first restaurant and he's getting even worse. Some of us might not need 4 restaurants to realize things aren't going to change, but Charlie has all hope in his father, and our heart aches along with him that it doesn't work, but we knew that was going to happen. We also knew that Charlie needed to grow up, so that's the happy conclusion of our story, is this resolution was satisfying to us, and it should be to Charlie, because this is going to happen. He's not the first young person, I'm sure you've been that way too, disappointed by the actions of adults. The sooner you learn it, that they're not perfect, the easier your life is. And so this is the benefit of this story for everybody, I think. In everyday use, what's the foreshadowing that's happening there? Well, for one thing, Mama has a dream that she's on Johnny Carson and her daughter and she make each other proud of each other. That's a foreshadowing. We know that dream isn't quite the way it's probably a little more like reality, because in the dream, Mama says to herself that Dee thinks orchids are tacky as she pins a flower on her. Well, that's a clue that the two of them are coming from separate sides of the spectrum, and that's probably not going to change. The past behavior of Dee matches perfectly what she is now. She was obnoxious growing up. The family did everything to send her away and let her accomplish her dreams, and she doesn't appreciate them for it, right? She wants to do a museum of what she grew up with, the butter churn and the quilts, but she doesn't appreciate them and she wouldn't be able to use them today. Your secondary characters rarely change. Dee is selfish and Maggie is kind. It's important to keep your secondary characters where they are. In a sense, they're almost metaphors or archetypes. They need to be the way they are because they need to hammer home your primary character's change. And that's what this story is really about. It helps that Maggie was kind even in the story. She's kind in the end and Mama appreciates it, but she's always been that way. She's always been understanding. She's the one who says, it's okay, Mama, Dee can have the quilts, even though she's just going to hang them on the wall. Maggie's always put herself, second to everybody else, and that's important. It's equally important that Dee be selfish and she end that way so that Mama can change and appreciate the kindness of Maggie. Let's look at foreshadowing in flight, okay? I mean, this is one of the most obvious ones, and it's in the first sentence or two. Claire is flying back to Britain into the setting sun, okay? Time travel, whenever we fly on an airplane, we go to another country or continent, we're actually doing a form of time travel. So she's flying into the setting sun, and to the reader, that tells us it could that, okay, and I didn't pick up on this until I read the story a second time, so I'm not trying to say that I'm a master of anything, but I thought that's an interesting little detail that the writer probably planted. If she didn't do it consciously, it was an unconscious plant, and it is very successful. It was wonderful. It tells us right now, we're going to remember that when she goes back and she tries to reconcile with Susan again, we're going to remember probably that she was flying into circumstances that were beyond the pale. We also know another reason there's a little foreshadowing is it was in the revelation that Susan had actually grown up the rebel, not Claire. Claire's the one that ultimately ended up breaking away and starting this fabulous new life for herself, and Claire had to stay behind. And Claire took care of her parents, and her life kind of was in limbo while she did that, and she's a little resentful for it because her life, again, she probably views Claire as having the more fabulous, exciting life. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but their differences run deeper than money. People are going to forgive some things like that, but they're probably not going to forgive the way that Claire made her feel. So that's another reason that we know that forgiveness is not going to be simple. That's a little bit the foreshadowing, the mastery of Hadley. Ways to add foreshadowing. I mean, how do you do this? Okay, you've already drafted most of your story, and I'm telling you, number one on the list, add it early. Well, you go back in time. You do a little time travel yourself, and you say, okay, I'm going to plant a seed in the first half to 2/3 of the story. Go back. You could add an image like the setting sun. You could add the storm. Whenever there's weather in a story, it really needs to serve double duty. Don't just have a bright sunny day and have that mean nothing. It can mean something, as in The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. The sun was almost too bright, and it turns out it was quite bright indeed. Any element of the weather needs to serve a function, and you can go back in and add that later too if you don't have it in your treasure chest or it hasn't come out. But anyway, again, the little clues marinate in the reader's mind while they read the rest of the story. So foreshadowing should hint at the after, as the setting sun did. In the case of reunion, our hints give us notice that Charlie's father was going to disappoint him, right? Thereby leading to Charlie's realization that he wouldn't see his father again. Do it through images. Images, foreshadowing can be as simple as the image, like I talked about, the weather, the setting sun. It could be a flower that's lost its petals, little simple things like that. You can't add too much. You don't want to have too many images for this kind of thing in any story anyway, because reader's mind won't have a place to land and focus. But you can do foreshadowing easy through images, and you can add them too after you've drafted the story. Honesty. We talked about this earlier. I mean, Dee is selfish in Mama's reflections and her past and the backstory. It stands to reason that she would be selfish, and even more so when we meet her in person. So Dee's whole behavior has told us that this isn't going to go down well for Dee, and Mama is going to have a change of heart about Maggie. We can kind of see that. Again, Maggie is kind and Dee is selfish. Dreams. Okay, dreams are one of the most powerful way through time immemorial, where there's little hints there. Dreams are a gift. They're really a gift from God to us, because dreams in our own life play a role. We dream every single night, so why wouldn't you take advantage of a dream and use it? Have your care to use a dream. A lot of people don't think dreams are overused in short stories. I don't think so. I think there's a lot of short stories that are written that are about dreams. I just wrote one, and the whole story takes place in a dream. So it's fine to use a little bit as your foreshadowing, for sure. In fact, for a longer story, you're almost crazy if you don't hint at a dream, because they're there, and they're things that you can completely manipulate for your purposes. Mama's dream, even the dream with Johnny Carson, doesn't go quite the way she planned either. She said, "But that's a mistake," Mama says. "Who could imagine me looking at a strange white man in the eye," referring to Johnny Carson. But she speaks of Dee. Hesitation was no part of her nature. We know Dee's not going to hesitate. She's not going to hesitate to run over everybody she can, and that's in the dream. Okay, a light touch is best when we talk about foreshadowing. It's always best to just do a little bit, a few hints. Ways to add foreshadowing. We talked about that. Now that I just want to reiterate, a light touch is best unless we talk about when you've got the obviousness of your minor characters. That's fine. You don't have to be too light with D. You can be a little too heavy, but I think Alice Walker is just right. Okay, now what we have for the rest of the time, you can do your hints with the foreshadowing, but it's really important that you finish writing your story. And I want you to spend most of your time doing that. You can actually add foreshadowing into the revision port, so I don't want you to get hung up on that. Like I said, I'm not giving a lot of new lessons this week because I really want you to push forward and finish that. Because congratulations, you are going for the home stretch. So when you're working on your writing, if you get stuck at any place in your last 1,000 words, I want you to reread any of our model stories or something else that inspires you. For me, I read nonfiction if I need fiction for inspiration. I just want to read something that reminds me of the power of writing, and that can help me a lot. Remember your secrets. If your secret and other things really in your treasure chest can really help you if you're stuck, you get a minor roadblock, just go back to your story worksheet and all those things there, and they may jog your mind in new ways. Free write, okay? Don't worry about looking at anything. Just free write. Work on the feelings of the characters and write as much as you want. Don't worry about structure at this point. I want you to finish the story. I can help you with structure. That's one thing that I'm pretty good at. I've done a lot, and it gives me a lot of joy to take raw clay and help you shape it into something that you're proud of and that, is a rewarding story for your reader. And last, you're looking for reasons to write. Who better than you? Whenever I find myself stuck with a poem or essay or anything, because if people tell you that writing is easy, they're lying. It brings me an awful lot of joy, but it is not easy. What makes me feel better is to think there's nobody better than me at this moment in time. Certainly there have been better writers in the past, and there are better writers now in my future, but at this particular moment, I'm the one with this particular draft, with this particular idea. So I am the best qualified person to write this story. So therefore, I have responsibility to finish it. And you can do that too. Okay? Let's review with what we need to for week 3, part 2. I want you to finish reading it if you haven't, because that would help you. That's another example of a great story that could help you. Write your resolution if you haven't, along with your characters before and after. Those are reminders. Add foreshadowing hints, or at least be aware of the foreshadowing you can do. Some things in your treasure chest, you could just jot things down there if you don't feel like you want to add it right now. Don't feel compelled to do it because it's not as important. Most importantly, though, I want you to write your 1,000 words of your story. This is really important. This is what this class is about. I want you to return it to me. Your due dates are at the very end of your lesson in the Wet Ink platform. You can see when we want to return those to me, and when I will give it back to you, I'll let you know when we'll do that. And you'll have something to work from for your revision portion, which will be week 4's lesson. That will be also a lot of fun too. So let's leave you with some inspiration. My short stories are like soft shadows, says Haruki Murakami. I have set out in the world, faint footprints I have left. I remember exactly where I set down each and every one of them and how I felt when I did. Short stories are like guideposts to my heart. Your short story, what you're working on right now, is the guidepost to your heart. So I want you to take inspiration from that. Your story has a little bit of you in it, and that's really, really important because nobody can write this story except you. So I want you to take heart from that wisdom, and I want you to go forward and finish that story. And we'll talk again soon in week 4. But again, congratulations for making it this far. See you.